Hello YouTubers and 3D printing enthusiasts. This is a project I recently completed. For me, it's a big step because I've learned how to make a dynamic model. I have a spreadsheet with variables for this utility box that I designed. And I can change any of these variables, box length, width, like let's make it 120 millimeters long. And it recomputes. You can see the box shifted, and we'll make it 70 millimeters wide. And let's say that we needed it to be 40 millimeters deep. Boom. So the box recomputes in its entirety with all the fillets and everything intact. And there is also a lid and a gasket that also recomputes. It was a fun project, but I ran into a problem with something called sketch flipping that drove me nuts, but I figured out a workaround for it. So what is sketch flipping?
Hello, future Kevin here at the editing desk. I was just putting this video together and I thought I should mention that in this tutorial, first off, I'm not an expert. I'm only sharing what I've learned, so there's probably better ways to do this or different ways. But secondly, this video presumes that you have the basic skills of sketching and creating objects in FreeCAD, and that you have moved up to the point where you're using var sets or spreadsheets to experiment with dynamic models. If you are not already at that skill level, there will be a couple of video tutorials linked down below from MangoJelly, maybe one from Adventures in Creation, that go through using spreadsheets. You need to be at that level before this tutorial will make sense to you. So we're not going to be covering all the little minutiae and basics of operating in FreeCAD. We're assuming that you're already up to a moderate level of skill within the program. Okay, back to the video.
I want to talk about something that the community, as I understand it, calls sketch flipping. It's a bug in FreeCAD that really only shows up in dynamic models or when you've got something where you're changing the dimension and you've got attached geometry to whatever you're changing the dimension of. Let me illustrate it for you. So I've made this simple shape and I have a spreadsheet that controls its dimensions. So here, box size 50. So let's tile our windows. If I change this dimension, 100, the box size changes. It's tied to it. So this would be a dynamic model. An example of this might be a pipe clamp or a utility box where you're going to possibly need custom sizes. So you'd make it dynamic so you could change the size as needed. Well, the problem arises with attached geometry. I'm going to modify this. Let's just hide the spreadsheet for a minute. And we're going to take this surface and we're going to attach some geometry to it. So I'm going to come back over to Part Design. With this surface selected, I'm going to do a new sketch. So I'm sketching on the surface. Now I'm going to import these corners using this Create External Geometry. It creates links to external geometry within our sketch. So I'm linking these corners of the box into our sketch. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can tie something to them. So let's tie these, let's tie some boxes to them. So you can see I'm coming to the corner until I see that coincident constraint. So I am anchoring the box to that corner. All right. And now I'm going to dimension these boxes. So we will make them square first off. I'm going to select these outer edges on all of them. And I'm going to make them equal. That makes them all square. And then I'm going to set a dimension on one of these boxes. So I'll set that line and we'll constrain it to 10 millimeters. There, they all shifted because they're all equal. So we've got these 10 millimeter boxes on the corners that are tied to the corners. I'm going to pad those boxes up so we can see them. That's fine. The dimensions don't really matter. This is just for illustration. So I have this shape and these boxes are tied to the corners. If I change the size of this, they should move with it. Let's bring our spreadsheet back up and tile our windows again. And let's change this value to, say, 120 millimeters. The box got larger. The corner boxes stayed where they are. That's good. Let's drop this down to, say, 60 millimeters. What happened to my boxes? Where did they go? This is sketch flipping. Let me show you what happened. If I go and I look at the sketch for my boxes, you'll see that they're still anchored at the corner, but they flipped. When this inner box shrunk down beyond their dimension, when it came down beyond the outer corner, which was in here, they flipped around. And that can really screw up your geometry, especially if you have something with B-splines or curves or arcs. The arcs will turn inside out, and it can be quite a mess. Normally, you don't run across this because you're just making a single model. You're making a model for a one-off, and you build the model and you're done. But in a dynamic model, if you're not careful, this can happen. And I have found one way to kind of work around it. So that's what I want to show you. Let's close this file. And I've got a second file that I have started to work on. Same situation. We've got a spreadsheet that controls the box size. We've got the box, and I have sketched 4 squares on my box. Let's go look at that sketch with the squares. I have not dimensioned them yet. What I'm going to do, they are anchored at this outer corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to anchor them inside as well. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do a centered rectangle. I'm going to tie it to the center point. And then I'm going to make it, I should have selected it beforehand, but I'm going to make it construction geometry. Here, toggle construction geometry. There, now you can see it's a blue dashed line. That means that this is something we can work with, but it's not a physical part of the sketch. It will not render. If I close this and we look at the sketch, all you see are the boxes. You don't see that center rectangle. And what I'm going to do is I am going to make this corner of each of these squares tied to this construction geometry. I'll select those 2 corners. I'll make them coincident. These 2 corners, coincident. These 2, and finally these 2. And now for my dimensions, if I wanted these boxes to be 10 millimeters, I have the dimension of this big box in my spreadsheet, right? So what I want to do is, if I want these to be 10, that's 10 for this one, 10 for this one is 20 across. So I'm going to take 20 away from my big box dimension. That's how I'm going to arrive at the distance between these 2, or the dimension I want to set for this construction line. So I'll select that. I'll come up here, I'm going to set its dimension, and I'm going to use a formula. I'm going to use the spreadsheet. And my box size, which is the big outer box, minus 20, because I want those little boxes to be 10 each. Hit OK. You can see that that shrunk. Now I'll set the dimension for this side. And we're dealing with a square, so it'll be pretty much the same thing. Minus 20. Okay. Now we've got our 10 millimeter boxes at the corners as we had before. I'll pad those up as we did before. Let's go over to Part Design. There they are. And now let's tile our windows and see if it breaks. So we'll change that dimension to, let's say, 150. Got real big. Corners stayed put. Let's drop it back down to 40. They're still there. 120. 60. And as you can see, they are not going to flip because they are anchored internally. So that's kind of my workaround for the sketch flipping. There's probably other ways to do it, but that's what works for me. Find some internal reference to the geometry that's flipping in the direction you don't want it to flip and tie it with a construction line. And you could do that with other shapes. I'm going to take this surface and I'm going to add another sketch to it. So we'll go over here to Part Design, to a new sketch. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put a circle in here. Let's put it on that horizontal line. Okay. And I'm going to bring in this edge of our outer box, and I want to make my circle connected to that edge. So I'm going to bring my circle, select it, select this edge, and add a tangency constraint. So the edge is tied there. Now I could set my diameter of this at, say, 10 millimeters and think I'm good because it's tied to the edge of the box. It's on this line, but it's going to flip. If I'm resizing the box, this circle will end up flipping onto the outside. So how do we tie it to the inside? Well, I'm just going to set a distance from here to here. I'm not going to set the diameter of the circle. Let's say I want it to be 10 millimeters. So that's 5 millimeters for its radius, 5 millimeters from its center to the edge of the box. So I'm going to take half the box width minus 5 to get this center point. And that's going to set the diameter of the circle at 10. So I've got this point selected, that point selected. Let's constrain a horizontal distance, use a formula. We'll pull from our spreadsheet the box size divided by 2 minus 5. And that should set our circle at 10 millimeters. And we can check that. I'm not actually going to create the constraint, but I'm going to just click on it and hit that. And you can see it says 10, right? So our circle is now defined at 10 millimeters. We'll close this. We'll pad it up so we can see it. Hit OK, and let's see if we can get it to break. Bring up the spreadsheet, tile the windows, and let's make it big, 120. Zoom out. It's right where it should be. Okay, here we go. 60. Didn't break. 150. Down to 40. And it's not flipping. 170. Oops, 170. There we go. 70. So by setting that distance, we tied it to the inside to keep it in place. So yeah, it's extra work, but if you're making a dynamic model that you're going to be resizing a lot, you might have to think about that to keep sketches from flipping. I hope you found that useful. And I'm sure that they'll fix this bug eventually. As I've heard from a couple of people, it's in discussion, heavy discussion. So they're aware of it. I'm sure they'll fix it eventually. See you in the next video.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you're not already a subscriber, click to subscribe. Join us on the Facebook channel for discussion about the videos. And if you'd like to help support this channel, please click to support me on my Patreon page.